In the shadows of a world shaken by fear and persecution, there stands a man whose voice is quiet but unyielding, James the Less, the guardian of silence. While the thunderous deeds of apostles like Peter and John echo through the ages, James walks a humbler path, one of prudence, wisdom, and unshakable faith. He is the steadfast anchor in a stormy sea, the silent strength holding the early church together when chaos threatens to tear it apart. His story is not told in grand gestures or booming proclamations, but in whispered counsel, in the courage found in silence, and in the faith that kindles hope in the hearts of persecuted believers. As shadows lengthen and enemies gather, James's quiet resolve becomes a beacon, a light that guides a fledgling faith through the darkest nights. Join us now as we journey into the hidden corridors of history, uncovering the story of James the Less, the unsung sentinel whose wisdom and silence fortified the church, shaping its destiny in times of trial. Chapter 1: The Quiet Flame. In the humble village of Nazareth, nestled among the rolling hills, dusty roads, and ancient olive groves, a quiet flame flickered, small and unassuming to the casual eye, yet fiercely alive within one particular soul. This was James the Less, the younger brother of Jesus, a man whose story would be woven not from thunderous miracles or grand public speeches, but from steadfast faith, deep wisdom, and a courage that burned quietly in the shadows. James was known by many names, the Less, the younger, a brother in the carpenter's family, but none truly captured the strength hidden beneath his modest exterior. His stature was humble, his voice soft, and his presence gentle, yet within him lay a fire of conviction that would shape the course of history. Growing up side by side with Jesus, James had a front-row seat to wonders that few could comprehend. The boy from Nazareth, who grew to become the Messiah, performing miracles that stilled storms and healed the broken, preaching words that challenged the proud and comforted the lost. Yet, unlike his brothers who often stood boldly in the crowds, James was the listener, the observer who absorbed every parable, every lesson spoken beneath the canopy of stars on quiet nights. His faith was forged in these intimate moments, the shared meals around simple wooden tables, the whispered prayers before dawn, the weighty silences that spoke volumes more than words ever could. He understood that greatness was not always proclaimed with fanfare, but lived quietly in the heart, nurtured by patience, humility, and unyielding trust. Yet, this gentle flame was soon to be tested. Dark clouds gathered over the land as Roman oppression tightened its grip. The tension between empire and people simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. For the early followers of Jesus, faith became more than belief, it became survival. The streets that once echoed with laughter grew tense with fear. The gatherings moved from open squares to hidden rooms, where whispered prayers and cautious glances were the currency of hope. And in the midst of this growing storm, James's quiet flame became a beacon, a steady light in a world descending into chaos. He was not a man of loud proclamations or dramatic gestures. Instead, his power lay in steadfastness, in the courage to remain faithful when voices faltered, in the wisdom to counsel those who stumbled, and in the silent strength that anchored a fledgling church amidst the fiercest trials. This was only the beginning. The quiet flame of James the Less was destined to ignite a fire that would illuminate the darkest corners of a persecuted world. His faith would become a foundation, unshakable and enduring, upon which countless souls would find hope and courage to stand. As the world outside grew louder and more dangerous, James prepared to step out from the shadows, not as a man of noise, but as the guardian of silence. His was a mission of hidden strength, whispered truths, and unyielding faith, a legacy that would endure for generations to come. Chapter 2: Shadows of Nazareth. Nazareth, a small and seemingly quiet village, bore the marks of history's heavy hand. Its narrow streets and stone houses held stories whispered through generations, tales of hope, hardship, faith, and struggle. But beneath the surface of this tranquil town, shadows gathered. Shadows not just of dusk or nightfall, but of fear, doubt, and the weight of unspoken burdens. James the Less walked these streets often, his footsteps measured and deliberate. Though the village was familiar, it was a place layered with unseen complexities. Nazareth was not merely the home of Jesus and his family. It was a microcosm of a people caught between tradition and change, loyalty and rebellion, fear and faith. In these shadows, James learned the harsh realities of life under Roman occupation. The constant presence of soldiers, the heavy taxes imposed on struggling families, and the ever-watchful eyes of informants bred an atmosphere thick with suspicion. Conversations hushed quickly when strangers approached. Trust was fragile and rare. James's own family bore the scars of this tension. As the brother of Jesus, he was both shielded and exposed, a paradox that deepened the shadows around him. The villagers whispered, some with awe, others with scorn. To many, Jesus was a prophet, a miracle worker, the promised Messiah. To others, he was a dangerous disruptor, threatening the fragile order. Amid these conflicting voices, James found himself torn. He admired his brother's courage, yet he understood the fear that gripped their neighbors. How could one stand firm when the world seemed bent on breaking those who dared to hope? But it was in the quiet moments, away from the eyes of the village, that James discovered the true depth of his calling. Beneath the olive trees, beside the flowing streams, he wrestled with his own fears and doubts, seeking a flame of faith that could burn through the darkest shadows. The presence of Jesus was a constant light in this struggle, a beacon of hope and strength. Yet, James knew that the path ahead would not be easy. The shadows of Nazareth were more than just darkness. They were the trials that would shape his soul, test his resolve, and prepare him for the monumental task of guarding a fledgling church. As the whispers of rebellion stirred and the Roman grip tightened, James's resolve grew stronger. He understood that faith was not just belief in miracles, but a steadfast courage to face the shadows, both within and without. The village of Nazareth may have seemed small and quiet, but its shadows stretched far beyond its borders, casting a veil over the land. And in the heart of this veil, James the Less began to forge the silent strength that would become his legacy, a strength born not from loud cries, but from the enduring light within the shadows. Chapter 3. The Bond of Brothers. In the quiet corners of Nazareth, where the hum of daily life mingled with the distant call of the marketplace, the bond between James and his brothers was forged, not in grand gestures or public displays, but in the simple, unspoken ties of family. James the Less was more than just the brother of Jesus. He was a witness, a confidant, and a keeper of secrets shared in the sacred silence of their shared home. Their bond was complex, woven through years of childhood memories, trials, and shared dreams of a future that seemed both impossible and inevitable. The brothers grew under the watchful eyes of their mother, Mary, whose faith was a quiet anchor in their lives. She nurtured them with stories of their ancestry, of promises whispered through generations, and the weighty call of destiny that rested upon their shoulders. Yet, the relationship between James and Jesus was unlike any other. It was a bond tempered by awe, respect, and a deep sense of purpose. James had watched Jesus walk paths few dared to tread, healing the sick, challenging the powerful, and speaking words that stirred hearts and angered rulers alike. But beneath the public miracles and teachings lay moments of private tenderness, a shared glance of understanding, a gentle word of encouragement, a hand steadying another in times of doubt. These moments revealed a profound connection, one that transcended blood and spoke to the soul. James learned that his role was not to overshadow, but to support, to be the silent strength behind the voice that would change the world. It was a heavy mantle, but one he bore with humility and unwavering loyalty. As the world outside grew darker and more hostile, this bond of brothers became a fortress. It was a source of courage when fear threatened to consume, a place of refuge when the storms of persecution raged. Yet this bond was also tested. The path Jesus chose was dangerous, fraught with enemies and betrayal. James wrestled with his own fears, questioning how a simple man could face such overwhelming odds and still walk forward with unshakable faith. But through every trial, the bond endured, strengthened by shared prayers, silent sacrifices, and a vision of a kingdom that would one day shine brighter than any earthly throne. In this sacred bond, James found his own calling, not to follow in the footsteps of grandeur, but to walk alongside, guarding the flame of faith with quiet devotion. The bond of brothers was not merely family. It was the foundation of a mission that would echo through eternity, carried forward by the guardian of silence himself. Chapter 4. Whispers of the Messiah. Across the rugged hills and dusty roads of Judea, a subtle murmur began to spread. Soft whispers, barely audible at first, yet growing louder with each passing day. The name whispered in awe and fear was one that stirred hearts and unsettled the powerful. Jesus of Nazareth, the Messiah. For James the Less, these whispers carried a weight that pressed heavily on his soul. They were not just idle talk. They were the stirring winds of change, heralding a destiny that reached far beyond the humble village of Nazareth. But amid hope and excitement, there was also caution, an undercurrent of danger that threatened to engulf everything they held dear. He would hear the stories in the marketplace, tales of blind eyes opened and crippled limbs made whole, of the hungry fed with loaves and fish, of the outcasts embraced and the proud brought low. Yet these miracles were not celebrated by all. The rulers of the temple and the leaders of Rome watched with suspicion, their whispers carrying threats and veiled warnings. At home, James watched Jesus closely, noting the quiet intensity behind his eyes, the burden of knowing what lay ahead. In the stillness of the night, he could hear the soft murmur of prayers, the whispered promises exchanged between brothers who shared a vision few could understand. James wrestled with conflicting emotions, awe at the divine power he glimpsed, fear for the peril it invited, and a deep yearning to understand his own place in this unfolding drama. Was his brother truly the promised Messiah, the anointed one sent to restore the kingdom of David? Or was he a man whose boldness would lead to ruin? The whispers grew into conversations, into debates in the homes and synagogues. Some believed with fervor, others dismissed the tales as dangerous folly. But through it all, James remained a silent observer, his faith quietly kindling like a hidden flame. He sensed that these whispers were more than words. They were the first tremors of a great awakening, a call to faith that would shake the very foundations of the world. And as the shadow of opposition lengthened, James knew the time was coming when silence would no longer suffice. He must prepare to be the steady rock amidst the storm, the guardian of the truth that would soon shine like a beacon through the darkest night. In the whispers of the Messiah, James found both a challenge and a promise, the beginning of a journey that would test his courage, his faith, and his very soul. Chapter 5. Trials in the Dark. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the rugged landscape, James found himself walking a path shrouded in uncertainty and danger. The whispers of the Messiah had grown into a roar, drawing attention from friends and foes alike. But with the light of faith came the inevitable darkness of trials. James had always been a man of quiet strength, but now his resolve was tested like never before. The world outside was no longer a place of simple routines. It had become a battlefield where loyalty and betrayal collided in deadly embrace. The religious leaders, threatened by Jesus' growing influence, wove plots in shadowed chambers. Their eyes burned with suspicion and fear, determined to crush the movement before it could ignite into a full blaze. James felt the weight of their scrutiny, knowing that to stand beside his brother was to invite their wrath. Amid this storm, James faced personal trials too, moments of doubt that gnawed at his heart, questioning the path laid before him. Would he falter when the night grew darkest? Could faith alone withstand the encroaching tide of fear and hostility? He sought refuge in prayer, in the quiet corners where no eyes could judge and no voices could accuse. It was there, in the solitude of the night, that James found a strength beyond his own, a light that pierced the darkness and whispered promises of redemption and victory. But the trials were not only external. Friends wavered, some turning away in fear, others consumed by jealousy. Even within his own soul, James grappled with the shadows of temptation, the pull of old habits, the allure of silence instead of speaking truth. Yet, in these trials, James discovered the essence of his calling. He was not meant to shine like a star, but to be a steady flame, burning quietly but persistently against the night. His faith became armor, his silence a shield, guarding the fragile hope that Jesus' message would survive the storm. Every step forward was a battle, every word spoken a risk. But James pressed on, his heart steadfast, his eyes fixed on the horizon where dawn would one day break, ushering in a new kingdom born of sacrifice and love. In the darkest trials, the guardian of silence found his purpose, to stand firm, to endure, and to prepare for the light that would overcome all shadows. Chapter 6. Keeper of the Faith. In the gathering shadows of a world gripped by fear and unrest, James the Less stood quietly, yet unyielding, the keeper of the faith. While the streets echoed with cries of defiance and fear, and the powerful clashed in open conflict, James tended to the unseen wounds of the fledgling church, nurturing a fragile hope that flickered in the hearts of the faithful. His strength was not forged in the fire of battle, but in the silent endurance of persecution. Secret meetings were held in hidden chambers, behind closed doors where flickering oil lamps cast trembling shadows on the walls. Here, James was a pillar, steady, unwavering, the calm in a storm of doubt and despair. The Roman Empire's iron grip tightened relentlessly. Soldiers patrolled the narrow streets of Jerusalem, their sandals echoing ominously on cobblestones, a constant reminder that faith came at a steep price. The leaders of the temple, threatened by the growing movement, whispered conspiracies, plotting to snuff out this new light before it could spread beyond control. Amid this rising tempest, James's role grew ever more vital. He did not seek the spotlight or speak loudly in public forums, but his presence was felt deeply. His wisdom and quiet counsel became a refuge for the weary, a source of strength for those whose faith faltered in the face of relentless persecution. He listened more than he spoke, understanding that sometimes the greatest power lay in silent support. His eyes, reflecting both sorrow and steadfast hope, met those of the broken and the frightened, assuring them that they were not alone. The keeper of the faith carried their burdens as if they were his own, weaving a tapestry of courage from the threads of fear and uncertainty. James's faith was a flame kindled in the darkest night, a light that did not blaze for glory but glowed with humble perseverance. His prayers filled the quiet moments between danger and despair, asking not for ease or safety, but for strength to endure, to hold fast, and to nurture the kingdom that Jesus had begun to build. His quiet acts of service, a comforting word, a shared meal, a whispered prayer, became the foundation stones of a community that would survive the fiercest storms. Through trials and suffering, James taught that faith was not merely belief, but a living, breathing force, a shield against the shadows of doubt and hatred. Even as the threat of arrest, betrayal, and death loomed large, James did not waver. He knew that the kingdom was not of this world, and that true victory lay in faithfulness, in the courage to remain steadfast when all else seemed lost. In the silence, in the shadows, James the Less became more than a guardian. He became the heart of a movement destined to change the world. The keeper of the faith, humble yet unbreakable, carried the flame that would one day ignite the hearts of millions. And in that flame burned the promise that no darkness, no persecution, could ever extinguish the light of hope. Chapter 7. Voices in the Silence. In the stillness of hidden rooms and under the cloak of night, voices rose softly, whispers carried on the breath of faith, fragile yet fierce. James the Less moved among these silent gatherings, the keeper not just of faith, but of stories, prayers, and unspoken truths. His was the voice in the silence, a quiet thunder that rallied the scattered souls of a persecuted people. The world outside was harsh and unforgiving. Roman soldiers marched with heavy boots and cruel intent, their presence a chilling reminder that to follow Jesus was to walk a dangerous path. Yet within the shadows, where light barely touched, the early followers clung to hope, fragile as a flickering candle flame, but no less vital. James listened to their fears, their doubts, their sorrows, the secret voices of those who dared to believe in a new kingdom. He understood that silence was not emptiness, but a sacred space where faith grew in whispered prayers and shared tears. In this quiet rebellion, James found his purpose: to give voice to the voiceless, strength to the weak, and courage to the frightened. The bond between believers was forged in these moments of stillness, where words were few but meaning was deep. James's wisdom guided them, his presence a steady flame in the darkness. He spoke not with grand gestures, but with a weight that carried across hearts, a reminder that even the smallest voice, raised in truth and love, could change the course of history. But the silence was fragile. The threat of betrayal lingered, shadows crept ever closer, and the cost of faith was written in the scars of those who dared to stand. Friends disappeared in the night, prisoners taken to unknown fates, and hope often felt like a distant shore beyond reach. Yet, through it all, James remained a beacon. His faith was an anchor in the storm, a quiet call to endurance when the world seemed determined to silence the message of the Messiah. Each whispered prayer, each hushed confession, was a battle cry echoing through the corridors of fear. James knew that the true power of the church lay not in numbers or loud proclamations, but in the steady, unyielding faith of those who stood firm when the night was darkest. These voices in the silence were the heartbeats of a movement that would not be crushed. In the quiet, James found strength beyond words, a divine assurance that the kingdom of God was unfolding, even if unseen by the eyes of man. And as the voices rose, fragile yet unbreakable, James the Less stood ready to carry their song into the future, a testament to the enduring power of faith whispered in the shadows. Chapter 8. The Council of Truth. The early church stood at a crossroads, beset by uncertainty and the threat of division. In a world where truth was often obscured by fear and falsehood, James the Less was called to a sacred duty, to be part of the Council of Truth, where faith, wisdom, and courage would shape the future of the believers. Gathered in a humble chamber, far from the prying eyes of the Roman guards, the leaders of the church debated and prayed. The air was thick with tension, as each man grappled with questions that could alter the course of history. How to preserve the message of Jesus. How to unite a fractured community. How to face the mounting dangers without losing faith. James listened intently, his heart steady but his mind sharp. His voice was calm, carrying the weight of experience forged in silence and trial. He spoke not for glory but for unity, urging patience, understanding, and above all, fidelity to the truth revealed by the Messiah. The council wrestled with challenges that tested their resolve. Should Gentiles be welcomed as equals? How to balance law and grace? What would it mean to walk the path of Jesus in a hostile world? James's words were measured yet passionate, reminding his brothers that truth was not a weapon to wield against others, but a light to guide all who sought the kingdom. He spoke of humility, courage, and the need to listen deeply, for in unity lay their greatest strength. Outside, the world remained dangerous. Spies and informants lurked, and the threat of betrayal was ever present. Yet within the walls of the council, hope flickered like a sacred flame. James's presence was a steady anchor amid the storm, a reminder that even in moments of doubt, faith must prevail. The Council of Truth was more than a meeting. It was a crucible where the early church was forged. The decisions made there would ripple through generations, shaping the way the message of Christ spread across lands and hearts. For James the Less, this was not merely a gathering of leaders, but a moment of destiny. His voice, tempered by silence and strengthened by faith, helped weave the threads of unity and purpose that held the church together. As the council concluded, James knew the road ahead would be perilous. Yet with truth as their compass and faith as their shield, the believers would face whatever trials came their way, united, unwavering, and ready to shine the light of Christ into the darkest corners of the world. Chapter 9. Faith Under Fire. The flames of persecution burned fiercely across the lands where the early church took root. In every shadowed alley and hidden chamber, followers of the Messiah faced threats not only from the sword and prison, but from the crushing weight of doubt and fear. James the Less, the quiet guardian, stood firm amid the tempest, his faith a blazing torch in a night consumed by darkness. The Roman Empire, relentless and unforgiving, cast a long shadow over the fledgling believers. To confess Jesus openly was to invite scorn, betrayal, and often death. Friends vanished overnight. Whispers of arrest echoed through the streets. Yet, in this crucible of suffering, the true nature of faith was forged. James witnessed the trials of his brothers and sisters, men beaten for their belief, women imprisoned for their prayers, children hidden away from the brutal grasp of soldiers. But even in chains and despair, their spirits remained unbroken. It was in this fire that James understood. Faith was not a shield to keep pain at bay, but a sword to cut through the darkness. Amid the chaos, James's resolve deepened. He moved quietly among the scattered flocks, offering counsel and comfort, his words like balm on wounds both seen and unseen. His strength was not in loud proclamations, but in the steady calm that inspired hope where there was none. The weight of persecution pressed heavily on his shoulders, yet he bore it with grace, knowing that every sacrifice was a seed planted for a greater harvest. Each act of courage, each whispered prayer in the dark, was a thread weaving the unbreakable fabric of the church's future. But James also faced his own battles, moments when the silence around him threatened to drown out the promise of the kingdom. Doubt flickered, as relentless as the flames that consumed their meeting places. Could faith survive such relentless assault? Would the message of peace and love endure? In these darkest hours, James turned inward, drawing strength from a wellspring beyond the world's pain. He remembered the words of the Messiah. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Those words were not just a promise. They were a call to stand unyielding. With faith as his armor and hope as his guide, James led the scattered faithful through the storm. He became a beacon, a quiet roar against the tempest, reminding all that even under fire, the flame of belief could never be extinguished. The fires of persecution would rage, but so too would the unbreakable spirit of those who dared to follow the way. And James the Less, the steadfast guardian of silence and strength, was ready to carry that flame into the coming dawn. Chapter 10. The Weight of Wisdom. In the fragile light of dawn, after nights heavy with prayer and trial, James the Less bore a burden unlike any other, the profound weight of wisdom. Not the wisdom of kings or scholars, but the sacred understanding born of faith, patience, and the quiet endurance of suffering. His path was not lined with glory, but with the solemn duty to guide a church trembling beneath the weight of uncertainty. The early Christian community was young, fragile, and vulnerable to the storms of doubt and division. Questions swirled like restless winds. How could they remain faithful when faced with relentless persecution? How should they live according to the teachings of the Messiah in a world hostile to their beliefs? How could they nurture peace when fear and suspicion threatened to tear them apart? James knew that true wisdom was more than knowledge. It was the art of discerning God's voice amid chaos, of balancing justice with mercy, courage with humility. His was a wisdom forged not in the courts of men, but in the quiet chambers of prayer in the deep silence where the Spirit whispered truths unseen. He counseled the scattered believers with gentle authority. To the weary, he offered patience. To the angry, restraint. To the lost, a reminder of the kingdom's eternal promise. His words were not mere advice, but lifelines, threads connecting hearts to a higher purpose. Yet this wisdom came with a price. The weight pressed upon James like an invisible mantle, reminding him constantly of the fragile lives depending on his guidance. Every decision bore consequence. Every counsel shaped destinies. There was no room for haste or pride, only for humble listening and steady resolve. In the midst of turmoil, James found solace in the example of the Messiah, whose teachings transcended worldly power and wisdom. He embraced the paradox of strength in gentleness, leadership in service, and authority in love. It was this wisdom that anchored the early church, allowing it to grow roots even in the harshest soil. But James also grappled with his own limitations. He understood that wisdom was a gift, not a possession, a light to be tended carefully, lest it flicker and fade. So he sought guidance in solitude, praying for clarity, courage, and the grace to carry his burden with faith. As the days unfolded, the weight of wisdom became not a chain, but a compass. It guided James and the community through tempests of doubt and danger, helping them navigate a path where faith and reason intertwined. In the silent strength of James the Less, the church found not just a leader, but a living testament to the power of divine wisdom, a beacon that would illuminate the path for generations to come. Chapter 11, Chains and Courage. The heavy clink of iron chains echoed through the dim prison walls, yet within the captivity of James the Less, a fierce flame of courage burned unextinguished. Bound by earthly chains but free in spirit, James embodied the paradox of imprisonment, a man shackled in body but liberated in faith. Persecution had become a relentless shadow over the early church. Followers of the Messiah were hunted, accused, and thrown into dungeons, their only crime a steadfast belief in a kingdom beyond this world. James knew well the price of such faith, the chains that could bind the body but never the soul. Inside the cold, dark cell, James remained resolute. His mind was a fortress, fortified by prayer and the knowledge that suffering was not meaningless but part of a greater story, the story of sacrifice, redemption, and hope. Each link of his chains was a reminder of his unwavering commitment, each moment of darkness a test of his inner light. Yet courage was not reckless bravado. It was a quiet, steady resolve, a refusal to let fear silence the truth. James found strength in the whispered prayers of fellow believers, in the memory of the Messiah's own suffering, and in the knowledge that their struggles were not in vain. Outside the prison walls, the world raged with suspicion and hatred, but within, James's courage became a beacon. Prisoners and guards alike could sense a power beyond flesh and bone, a force rooted in faith that neither shackles nor threats could diminish. This courage inspired others to endure, to resist despair, and to hold fast to hope. Stories of James's steadfastness spread quietly, crossing the walls and reaching the ears of the faithful scattered across cities and villages. His chains became symbols, not of defeat, but of defiance against oppression. James understood that his courage was not his own, but a gift sustained by divine grace. He prayed not for freedom from chains alone, but for the strength to carry the weight of his calling. The path was perilous, the price high, yet he remained unwavering, a shepherd guarding his flock even from behind prison bars. In the darkest hours, James's spirit shone brightest. His chains could not bind the truth he bore, nor the love that fueled his mission. With courage as his armor and faith as his shield, he stood ready to face whatever trials awaited, a living testament that even in captivity, the soul remains free. Chapter 12, The Hidden Shepherd. In a world cloaked in fear and shadow, where the light of faith flickered uncertainly beneath the weight of persecution, James the Less emerged not as a roaring lion, but as the hidden shepherd, a quiet guardian guiding his scattered flock through perilous times. His was a leadership that required no spotlight, no grand stage, but a steadfast heart and unwavering devotion to the souls entrusted to his care. The Roman Empire's grip tightened relentlessly. Believers were hunted, gatherings broken apart, and whispers of the Messiah met with cruel silence. Yet, amidst this suffocating darkness, James moved like a shadow of hope, unseen by many, yet profoundly present in the lives of those who still dared to believe. Unlike the public figures of the early church, James embraced humility as a shield. He knew that in such dangerous times, leadership meant protection, not just of oneself, but of the fragile community that clung to the promise of salvation. His voice was rarely heard in the marketplaces or synagogues, but it resonated deeply in the hidden rooms where faith was nurtured in secret. James's role was multifaceted. He was a comforter to the brokenhearted, a counselor to the fearful, and a beacon of quiet strength to the weary. Through secret letters, discreet meetings, and trusted messengers, he wove a network of faith that transcended physical boundaries. Each word he penned carried the weight of hope, each action the courage to endure. His wisdom extended beyond mere survival. James understood that the church needed more than shelter. It needed roots deep in love and unity. He encouraged believers to see beyond their suffering, to hold fast to the teachings of Christ even when the world seemed determined to erase them. He reminded them that true shepherding was not about power or recognition, but about service, a sacrificial love that mirrored the good shepherd himself. The hidden shepherd's care reached into the lives of families torn apart by fear, into the hearts of young disciples unsure of their path, and into the souls of those tempted to despair. In every quiet act, James's presence was a lifeline, a whisper of God's enduring promise that no one would be forsaken. Despite the ever-present danger, James never wavered. His faith was a lamp in the night, guiding the faithful through uncertainty and trials. And though he remained hidden from the eyes of the world, his influence shaped the early church's resilience, ensuring that even in the darkest hours, the light of Christ would never be extinguished. In embracing his role as the hidden shepherd, James the Less showed the world that true leadership often walks in silence. It is found in the patient endurance, the unseen sacrifices, and the quiet strength that holds a community together when all else threatens to fall apart. As he tended to his flock with gentle hands and a courageous heart, James's legacy became a testament to the enduring power of faith whispered in the shadows, a beacon that would inspire generations to come. Chapter 13, The Final Stand. The time had come for a decisive moment, the final stand. The world around James the Less was closing in, and the faint glimmers of hope that had sustained the early church now faced their greatest trial yet. Persecution surged like a relentless tide, sweeping away friends, scattering believers, and threatening to extinguish the fragile flame of faith. James knew that this was no ordinary battle. It was a spiritual war, waged not with swords or shields, but with the courage to endure, the strength to forgive, and the unyielding conviction to hold fast to the truth of the Messiah's message. This stand would test every fiber of their being, pushing the disciples to the brink, demanding a faith forged in fire. The streets of Jerusalem grew more dangerous by the day. Roman soldiers prowled relentlessly, and secret meetings became even more perilous. Betrayal lurked in every corner. Neighbors, once friends, turned informants, and the cost of loyalty was measured in pain and loss. Yet, in the face of this darkness, James's resolve blazed brighter than ever. Gathering the remaining faithful, he spoke with a voice both firm and tender. "We stand not for ourselves," he said, "but for the promise of a kingdom that cannot be shaken. Our blood may be spilled, our bodies broken, but our spirits remain unbroken. This is the final stand, a stand of faith, hope, and love." James led with humility, knowing that the outcome was beyond human control. Still, he inspired his followers to rise with courage, to protect one another, and to proclaim the truth boldly, even if it meant death. Every act of kindness, every shared prayer, every whispered testimony became an act of defiance against the darkness. The final days were marked by sacrifice and sorrow. Friends fell, martyrs were made, and the air was thick with grief. Yet, even as the shadows lengthened, the light of their faith burned steadily. James's example, his unwavering commitment, his fearless love, became a rallying cry that echoed through the hearts of believers. In the silence between battles, James found strength in prayer and Scripture. He sought solace in the words of the Messiah, drawing courage from the promise that death was not the end, but a passage to eternal life. His faith was an anchor, steadying him amidst the storm. Though the final stand was marked by great loss, it was also a victory of spirit over despair, of hope over fear. The church survived, not because it escaped suffering, but because its foundation was built on the unshakable rock of faith. James the Less faced the end with grace, knowing that his sacrifice was part of a greater plan. His final stand was a testament to the power of enduring faith, a legacy that would inspire countless generations to come, a flame that would never be extinguished. As the sun set on this chapter of history, the light of James's courage continued to shine, a beacon for all who walk the path of faith in the face of darkness. Chapter 14, Legacy of Light. The story of James the Less did not end with his final breath. Instead, it marked the beginning of a legacy that would shine across centuries, illuminating the path for generations of believers who would follow. His life, a testament of quiet strength and unwavering faith, became a beacon, a legacy of light in a world often shrouded in darkness. In the years that followed, tales of James's courage, wisdom, and gentle leadership spread beyond the borders of Jerusalem. His name was spoken in hushed reverence in the gatherings of the faithful, inspiring those who face their own trials and tribulations. His example taught that true greatness lies not in power or wealth, but in steadfast devotion and humble service. The early church, shaped by the sacrifices of men like James, grew slowly but surely. From hidden rooms and secret meetings, the message of the Messiah reached distant lands, carried on the breath of those who believed. This light, fragile yet unyielding, kindled hope in hearts burdened by fear and doubt. James's teachings endured, woven into the fabric of Christian faith. His emphasis on patience, love, and truth guided the leaders who came after him, reminding them that the kingdom of God is built on the foundation of compassion and courage. His legacy was not one of grand monuments or loud declarations, but of the quiet, persistent flame that refused to be extinguished. Even amid persecution and darkness, the light of James's life served as a compass. It beckoned believers to remain faithful, to love their neighbors fiercely, and to carry the message of Christ with humility and grace. His story became a symbol of hope, that no matter how small or overlooked, a single life dedicated to God's truth can change the course of history. The legacy of light shone brightest in the lives transformed by faith. Communities gathered, churches were founded, and the flame that James tended so carefully was passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. His courage echoed in the voices of those who dared to speak truth to power, and his love lived on in acts of kindness and mercy. In every whispered prayer, in every courageous stand for justice, the spirit of James the Less remained alive. His legacy was a call to each believer to carry their own light into the world, to be a source of hope and strength in times of trial. As the sun rises and sets over centuries, the light of James the Less continues to guide the faithful, a radiant testament that even the quietest flame can illuminate the darkest night. And so, his legacy endures, an eternal flame burning brightly in the hearts of all who seek to follow the way of the Messiah. As we reach the end of this journey through the life of James the Less, the quiet guardian of faith, we are reminded that true strength often dwells in silence. His story is a testament to the power of steadfast belief, of courage not in grand battles, but in the daily choices to stand firm amid shadows. James walked paths hidden from the eyes of the world, yet his influence echoed through the ages, carried in whispered prayers, in the unbroken chain of believers who kept the flame alive. In a world that sought to silence the message of the Messiah, his voice rose steadily, a beacon of hope and perseverance. His legacy is not confined to history, but lives in every heart that dares to believe, to love, and to serve. It reminds us that even the smallest light can dispel the deepest darkness, and that faith, though sometimes fragile, is unbreakable when nurtured with love and truth. May the story of James the Less inspire you to be a bearer of light in your own time, to speak when silence is demanded, to stand when fear threatens, and to hold fast to the truth that unites us all. The flame he kindled burns on, eternal and bright, lighting the way for all who follow the path of faith. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found inspiration in James's story, please consider subscribing and sharing this channel. Your support helps us continue bringing these timeless tales to light.